Off the Ball. This is News Talk.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. Now, Kerry and Dublin meet in the Allianz National Football League this evening. A sold-out Austin Slack Park 7 o'clock throw-in for the Division 1 encounter. Joining us on the line, Dara Ó Cinnéide, the 2004 All-Ireland football winning captain. Dara, how are you?
Not too bad at all, John, yourselves?
Yeah, good, thanks, Dara. This is the game in Gaelic football. This is what it's all about. They might not be in an All-Ireland final, but at the moment this is going to be very informative, the Dubs against Kerry. This is what we live for.
Yeah, there's a lot of curiosity around it, I suppose, especially after last weekend. I suppose a lot of exaggeration as well coming out of it. People saying the Dublins are in decline and Kerry should be concerned as well. There were signs the last day, of course, it wasn't the best performance from Kerry up in Newbridge, and Dublin obviously weren't great the night before against Armagh, but Tralee will be buzzing tonight. There's a lot of interest in the game on the ground here in Kerry. Tickets sold out early when they went online. A lot of controversy about that as well. People a bit annoyed, I think, that it was online only and season ticket holders only. But there is a demand for it. There is demand always for this fixture, and I suppose if past encounters are anything to go by, it's going to be tight. There's been a few draws in recent years. I was in Tralee, I suppose, about 5 years ago in 2017 when there was plenty of tension in the area. With Fitzmaurice in charge of Kerry, Jim Gavin in charge of Dublin, and a half-time skirmish and plenty good rattles in the game. And that's the kind of atmosphere I suppose a Saturday night in Tralee creates. As you know, I suppose Tralee and Killarney are the two venues for Kerry people, and there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes in Kerry at the moment, redeveloping Austin Sacks Park over the last number of years and into the future as well. And it just creates a great atmosphere inside in Tralee. On a night like this, there'll be music beforehand, there'll be entertainment, and hopefully there'll be entertainment on the pitch as well, a bit better probably than was last weekend from both teams.
The Kerry punters will want their players to make a statement.
They would, and I suppose Dublin likewise. There's not a lot of patience on the ground in Kerry, but there has to be a bit of realism as well. In fairness to both teams, they're feeling their way through this. Dublin more so than Kerry. I suppose Kerry have a certain amount of experience out on the team selected, but they'll have to be patient. I suppose there was a bit of disappointment with Kerry's second half performance the last day. There's no doubt about that. A lot of possession, just no penetration, and I know the wind played a huge factor. It's wet and windy down here at the moment. It would probably be the same at 7 o'clock this evening inside in Tralee, so that has to be factored into it. It's not an excuse, but it's a reason sometimes for the quality of football being played. The best football played last weekend was played by Armagh, so Dublin really don't have that excuse. It was decent enough conditions for good football. They just didn't seem to be, I suppose, at the level that they previously were, and that again is to be expected. They are trying out an awful lot of new options, and there does seem to be a gap emerging in Dublin between, let's say, the established core group of players who are still amongst the top 10 players in the country and the players that they're trying out. And there's a huge amount of pressure on those Dublin players at the moment. I know myself, a long time ago in the early 90s, when Kerry were in that kind of a transition from a golden era into an era of uncertainty, there was a lot of pressure on younger players coming through, and that's there for Dublin again because the expectation is there. But the expectation is in Kerry as well. They're coming out of a 3-year management regime which Peter Keane made strides and did an awful lot right. Jack O'Connor has been appointed for the third time. Jack tends to do well with teams, but the style and the approach last Sunday certainly wouldn't be to Jack's satisfaction and wouldn't be to Kerry supporters' satisfaction either.
And to that end, Dara Ó Cinnéide, is it good for Jack to have Jack Barry and Dermot O'Connor back in the middle?
It is, but these lads have been playing an awful lot of football with McGrail up until last weekend. They were beaten by Steelstown, and I think Jack was asked after the game, we have to see where they're at. Obviously the lads showed a preference and a willingness and an enthusiasm for this game, but it'll be a bit much to expect them to step up and take over and improve even our midfield lot. From last Sunday's showing in Newbridge, what we had last Sunday in Newbridge, we had Adrian Spillane and Sean O'Shea. I think they've ditched that obviously with the team selection. Jack Barry, Dermot O'Connor are in two natural midfielders. Sean O'Shea is a natural forward. Adrian Spillane is a hard grafting wing forward, stroke midfielder. Did a certain amount right, especially in the first half, the last of the second half when Kevin Feely came onto the field. He took over midfield, and Kildare ran amok. Kevin Flynn had a great game there as well. And Jack is going to try these lads out, the two Nagoya lads out. They're good players. Dermot O'Connor is at a stage of his career, I'm sure, where he's stepping up into, let's say, a mature role now where he might be the number one midfielder, and Jack Barry has done a good job in the past against Dublin more so, and has shown a level of consistency, and they obviously have a familiarity with each other from playing there. But you're coming up against the likes of Brian Finton. It's a different ask altogether. But Kerry have ditched last week midfield quite quickly. I would have thought maybe, it was a bit hard on Sean O'Shea, for example. He's a natural centre forward. Jack is a fierce believer, I would think, in playing players in their natural and favoured and preferred positions. Sean O'Shea is a centre forward. So I don't know, will Sean O'Shea ever again, be tried out in midfield? I think it's worth experimenting with a small bit more. But the wiggle room for experimentation in the National League in recent years has gone all to there. Every game takes on, an importance of its own in the National League, and that wiggle room isn't there anymore.
And Dara, you know Jack well. In 2004, you were the captain of Kerry when it was his first season. We know as well in 2009 he came back and he won the All-Ireland in his first season again. What is Jack good at? What will he have observed when it comes to Kerry winning the All-Ireland? Because that's the currency in Kerry. What will he have observed in terms of what needs to be improved, and how do you think he's going to go about it?
Well, I think we have to accept and acknowledge that probably the Jack O'Connor of 2022 was a different animal altogether to what he was in 4 and 9, and in different, I suppose, iterations of what he was. He in his own life now, I suppose he's retired as a teacher. He's more relaxed probably about the game, and obviously he's an older, wiser, more mature, more experienced manager, more self-assured. He made a decent bit of progress even in the last 2 years with Kildare, and that's valuable in itself, to learn from a different environment and see how what it makes other players from other counties tick. So I would imagine, he's not going to do panic. What he's good at, like any decent manager, he's good at observing weaknesses in opposition teams. He's good at having a feel for players, what kind of footballers they are in their natural positions. He's a man I have huge respect for. I think Jack famously took over the job in 2003-04 at a time of huge uncertainty in Kerry football, and there was a lot of question marks about him then. I think that was when the screw was really turned on him as a manager. So whatever pressure comes this year, and there will be pressure, of course, in the Kerry job, it's going to roll off him like water off the duck's back, because he's a lot more mature as a manager now than he was back then. And he has a very, very impressive CV, and he does get the best out of players, and he's well aware of the fact that if performances and results don't follow, that pressure will still be there. But I think on a personal level he'll be able to let it roll off him. Jack's only concern, I would imagine, is to try to improve this team. In this group, they were very close in the last number of years. There's certainly plenty of opinions around the county as to how they could go to the next level. Jack was one of those opinions. He was dealing with Murphy and Michal Quirk and Paddy Talley, and with him and a few more guys gathered around. And it'll be very interesting to see what they bring to the table, because there's a lot of good footballers there, but they just haven't unlocked the right combination yet to make it beyond being, beyond demolishing teams in Munster and having really good league campaigns. The next step for them is obvious. And it's self-evident, and it was for Peter Keane and his previous regime, that it was all Ireland or bust, and that's probably a bit unfair, but it is reality. And games like this evening's against Dublin are what he's going to want to test him out. An angry Dublin team, a team with James McCarthy back in as a dog of war for a wet evening, that's going to improve Dublin no end. So I would say we will learn an awful lot about, the one or two changes that Jack and his management team have even made in the last week over the course of an hour and a half inside in Tralee this evening. Should be very, very interesting.
It is all happening, Dara. Bundee Aki has just scored a try for Ireland, and Johnny Sexton about to kick the conversion. So Ireland 5, Wales 0 at the moment in the Six Nations, the start of it at the Aviva Stadium. And we also have West Ham equalising through Declan Rice, 1-1 against non-league Kidderminster in the FA Cup 4th round. So West Ham pulling it out of the fire as Johnny Sexton kicks that conversion, 7 points to 0 for Ireland against Wales. A great start for the Six Nations Championship. Pillar Caffrey, the ex-Dublin manager. How are you, Pillar?
How are you doing, John?
We got Dara Ó Cinnéide and Pillar Caffrey looking ahead to carrying the Dubs this evening in the league. And as Dara was saying there, Pillar, James McCarthy and Colin Callahan back in the team. That's the one that's named by Dessie Farrell. And we need a bit of leadership from the Dubs.
Yeah, look, they will be disappointed with their performance last weekend. I see the team that's named, but I'm not sure that'll be the team that'll line out. I'd love to see James and Con back in it, because I think they need that bit of experience and strength and maybe direction up front. But I heard a whisper that James is definitely out, and I'm not sure about Con. So there could be changes to that team. It's a very short turnaround for teams week to week at the start of the National League, and so we'll see what happens. But look, both teams will be looking for a victory tonight. Both teams certainly will be looking for an improved performance. Kerry played well in the first half last week, but I thought they fell into their old trap that's been haunting them a bit, of trying to protect the lead from far too early last week, and were caught by Kildare. And look, the Dubs just didn't get out of the blocks at all. I think they were outfoxed by Geezer last Saturday night, and I think they'll be very disappointed with a lot of their. The standards seem to have dropped quite a bit from the bar where they've set their level of performance at over the last while. So a worrying week for both camps, really. And look, isn't this what we love? Dublin-Kerry, I was down there in 2019 for that fantastic game. And, it'll probably be wet, cold, Tralee tonight, 12,000 people packed in, great atmosphere. And both teams with something to prove after last weekend, and with further big tests down the line to come.
Philly McMahon, Kevin McManaman, Cian O'Sullivan, Michael Darmacawley, Paddy Andrews all retired. Stephen Cluxton, by all evidence, has retired as well, even though there wasn't an announcement. Jack McCaffrey and Paul Mannion not available. All of these key players, Pillar, in the greatest team that have played the game, one would argue. So is what happening now inevitable? Transition?
Yeah. Look, John, I would think so. And listen to Dara talking there a few minutes ago, in terms of the need of Kerry, in terms of, it's 2014 since they last won the All-Ireland. I think for Dubs, and I think, Dublin supporters are going to have to bite their lip a little bit. We've lived through the greatest 10 years of Dublin senior football ever. Unlikely to ever see the likes of it again. And, Dessie Farrell said himself last week post-match that, look, this team is in a transition period, which, the names you roll off there, John, even in 2019, I was just looking back, the subs that they brought in that night were Paddy Andrews, Michael Darmacawley, Jack McCaffrey, Paul Flynn, and a certain lad who's loved in Kerry, Kevin McManaman. So when you're talking about these names and you're saying, now all of a sudden, this isn't... Dublin got over the line in 2020 in the strangest All-Ireland ever, and last year, the performances were poorish in Leinster. There was a little bit of deja vu as we went down the road, and the first half against Mayo, you said, right, look, they're back at it. But the second half and the extra time was very, very troubling and worrying, and we don't have the strength and depth anymore, and that's just a fact. Dessie or anybody else that was there just can't reinvent the wheel and bring back these once-in-a-lifetime players. So I think this transition is a little bit worrying, because rather than seeing 19 and 20-year-old guys coming in and cutting their teeth, we're looking at guys that have been around for quite a while getting starts. The two Pascal brothers, they've been good club players with Ballyboden, but it's a different step up in terms of the level that you're looking at. Even in relation, it's quite worrying around midfield. Since Michael Darmacawley retired and went down the pecking order, James McCarthy is probably the best foil for Brian Fenton at midfield, but we're struggling to get anybody else to actually go in there and nail down that second midfield spot. James is obviously a utility player in that he can be needed in the half-back line or at centre-back. And, we're struggling. The last day, Emmett O'Connell came in and played a half and was substituted. He's not named tonight. And again, look, Emmett is around a long time as well. So these aren't young fellas that are being thrown in and tested. These are guys that, maybe have been around a while and haven't been able to break in, and maybe their time has come and gone, and it's going to take a bit more rooting by Dessie to undercover a few more players that are, maybe younger, further down the track, fellas we haven't heard of before.
Are there any question marks, Pillar, around the coaching and what needs to be fixed there? Lack of penetration in attack, maybe defensive issues, the slow start last week, and maybe just that in the Jim Gavin era, it was so perfect that I suppose when there's any kind of degree of imperfection, it does get a magnifying glass on it. Yeah,
look, it's very hard, there's a lot of talk around in terms of management or whatever, but I think, look, Dessie has taken on an almost impossible task in following Jim Gavin's footsteps. Look, he did very well to get the team over the line in 2020. Last year, we came unstuck, and I think this year, it's probably more worrying this year, because as you're looking down the list of players and where is the energy. During Jim Gavin's era, we were renowned to have a bench that was going to kill off every opposition, and the bigger the challenge came, the bigger the names that were on the bench that were coming in to finish off teams. But now, all of a sudden we're looking at Cormac Costello is a definite starter if he's fit. How many times did he come off the bench and kill teams? And now Cormac's picked up injuries. So it would be slightly worrying in terms of, while it is understandable, the standards that Dublin have set themselves, we're probably not going to be able to reach them, albeit that, look, we are looking for improvement from last weekend. But I would be just slightly fearful that, look, we are going to go through this transition period and maybe there's not all Ireland's coming down the track for Dublin. Maybe we have come into the pack and we're going to be swallowed up by the Tyrones and the Kerrys, and you look at the improvement in the Armagh, if they can continue on that level of improvement. So that'll be my fear going forward, and that's why tonight will be revealing, because Desi's obviously have to go into the panel again and look hard at some of these guys that are going to get, and what an opportunity it is to play Kerry down in Kerry and measure yourself and see where you're at. And look, Desi will get quick answers, because like our Armagh performance wasn't good enough. We'll see what unfolds tonight, and then in 2 weeks' time, Mayo and Croke Park will be another great barometer in terms of where Dublin football is at in the short term.
Dara Ó Cinnéide, I feel as a Dublin person that the Dublin aura has gone. You won your fair share of All-Irelands, Dara, but when, say, Tyrone came on the scene in 03 and 05, they didn't have any fear about Kerry. And I feel with counties that this is wide open this year. There's no fear anymore. There's no fear of Kerry. There's no fear of Dublin. And this is a completely new landscape.
It is a new landscape. I think it's a bit of a new landscape. The minute Mayo beat Dublin, it was always going to be year defining. Look, the greatest, and you can't say one of the greatest team, and it's probably unfair to compare eras, but that Dublin team that won 6 in a row, people forget that they were also winning National League titles in that period. Kerry in the 70s and 80s were winning championships. They'd win the odd league here and there. They didn't place that much emphasis on it. But this Dublin team, for 6 or 7 years, they were just winning all around them. And games like tonight's game in Tralee were treated. I remember being in Tralee, I forget what year it was, Dublin were going for, I don't know, was it to equal or to go past Kerry's record of 29 or 30 games unbeaten? And it was a kind of a target for Kerry at the time, say, could they stop them? Because it was Kerry's record going back to the late 20s, early 30s. And, that's a game that they shouldn't have survived in. They went unbeaten. I think it finished in a draw. It probably was 17. But, Dublin don't bring that anymore. And that was inevitable. We were all sages and we were all full of, noise when Mayo beat them last year. And it's always the way when a great team falls. Everybody says, how did we not see that coming? It's just a natural thing. It was never, even Dublin people within media circles were saying, yeah, we're really enjoying this, when all the rest of us were bleating on about, Dublin's resources, etc., etc. Even then, there were times when you'd say, oh, Jesus, it can't last. And, it didn't last. It's not. In the last year, the last season or so, we've seen Dublin fall back a small bit. But they still have 5 or 6 of the best footballers in the country. Even if they go off with that team tonight, for example, you're looking at James McCarthy, Brian Howard, Brian Finton, Kieran Kilkenny and Conor Callan. No, I don't expect all of them to be playing tonight. But they are 5 of the top 10 footballers in the country right there still. So they're not that bad. And yes, the aura might be gone and the fear might be gone, but the respect is still there and still has to be there. They've earned that right. They've earned that respect. And, I'm sure they'll get that. Until such a time another team comes along and creates an aura like they did. You mentioned, John, like Tyrone beating us the odd time. It wasn't like we had an aura about us. We were winning in All-Ireland here and there, and there were decent teams that we played on. But this Dublin team are an exception to every rule, and I always put forward a theory, it didn't matter. Let's say, I remember Dublin beating Kerry down in Kerry, which was unusual. I think it was Pat Gilroy's first year in charge, and that was a real sign. In Jim Gavin's, I remember Fitzmaurice's first year, and it was Jim Gavin's 2013. Dublin beat Kerry and Killarney. It doesn't happen that often. I think it's only happened 3 times between Tralee and Killarney over the years in the league that they beat Kerry. And Kerry don't often get beaten in Killarney. And you knew there was something happening. And it's hard to create that aura about yourself, and you do it by winning the games that you're not supposed to be winning on the road. All this argument about Croke Park and Dublin. In the years when Dublin were really in their pomp, and they're not that far off their pomp either, they're only 9 months removed from it, they were winning these games up in Monaghan or drawing these games down in Tralee that they shouldn't have been. And that is to their credit. Like, it was never going to last. But it just lasted a bit too long for the other 31 counties in the rest of the country, and that's where we have Dublin this evening. And if there is a bit of defiance, and we know it to be, from these players, the players that have been there, done that, they're going to be as defiant as hell inside Tralee tonight. They're not going to, that's the big challenge from Kerry's point of view, because as you mentioned, Kerry have won All Ireland in the last 13 years. That's 2014. Take 2014 out of it, goes back to 2009, and that in itself will never be good enough for Kerry people. And that's the reality of the expectation down here as well. So that's what makes it so fascinating this evening. Are Dublin as bad as they looked last weekend? Are Kerry anywhere near getting towards the top table? Can they get rid of the bad habits of the second half last Sunday, even that reappeared again? All that kind of stuff is feeding into tonight. So it's going to be good, but it is still winter football, and it is still, as we saw last weekend, very much a game of two halves that could be won by a free kick into a breeze or something like that. Those kind of games where there's more value on it. I always said that a free taker was more important in the league than in the championship in a way, because they're the types of games that you could have a 14 points to 12 win, and maybe 10 of the points came from a Dean Rock or from a Sean O'Shea. That kind of a game. Sure. And that's what I'm expecting this evening.
Okay, briefly, Pillar Caffrey, your verdict on tonight, Kerry in the Dubs?
Yeah, look, I hope Dublin are very competitive. A draw would be a great result for Dublin, but I'd be fearing that Kerry will have too much in the tank for them with the team that they've named. To me, it looks as if Kerry have gone with their strongest possible line out. Gavin White obviously injured, and maybe David Moran to come back when he's fit. But other than that, I think that's Kerry's first team, where I think the Dublin 15 that will talk out tonight will be a fair bit short of what Desi would want to have put out. So I'd expect Kerry to do them, but I'd be hoping that Dublin will really put up a great show tonight. And
Dara Ó Cinnéide, your verdict on this evening's game?
I think Kerry should win narrowly, for the simple fact it just didn't like the look. I know Dublin should improve from last weekend, but just some of the approach play, some of the decision making, all the play last weekend, it looked like a bit of a chore, and it looked like a bit of a struggle and a bit laboured. I just don't think you can get out of that in a week. You'll get a reaction, but I would be expecting Kerry to win on home turf.
Dara Ó Cinnéide, Pillar Caffrey, enjoy the game this evening. I can't wait for it. Enjoy it.
Cheers, John.
Thanks, John. See you, Dara.
Dara Ó Cinnéide and Pillar Caffrey there. Dublin and Kerry legends on tonight's game. 7 o'clock start, Austin Stack Park. We got it all going on in sports today.